We are discussing travel and studying overseas, and we want to hear from you on Facebook and Twitter. So join the conversation at #OurTakeAriseTV. And remember to leave your comments on our Facebook page, Our Take on Arise TV, and tell us what you think. Well, for some parents, sending their child away to summer camp can actually feel a little scary. Will my daughter be okay? Can my son contact me whenever he wants? So imagine what it must feel like to see your middle school child go away for a year and to another country. Well, that's exactly what happened to my next guest. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. David Hill allowed his daughter, Kari, to study abroad when she was 12 years old. And it didn't stop there. Kari returned to Europe for multiple study abroad programs. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
You probably have a whole bunch of stamps on your passport. You must have enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, it was definitely great. I first went to Spain when I was 12 because I was interested in learning Spanish. So I was telling Dad that I wanted to learn Spanish. I was interested in becoming fluent, and he thought that it would definitely be worthwhile to study abroad.
Well, Dad, there's a lot of different ways to get Kari to learn Spanish. What made you decide to take the next step as opposed to getting a tutor and sending her to Spain?
Well, she came to me one day and she said, Dad, I really want to learn how to speak Spanish. So the first thing I said to her was, well, you're not going to learn a lot of Spanish in our house. So she had to go somewhere where people speak Spanish, and I felt that the full immersion experience would give her the best opportunity.
But Kari was just 12 years old.
Yeah.
You weren't worried at all? I mean,
Well,
she's so young.
After I dropped her off, I was worried.
I bet you were.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
But she was always very adventurous. She's been going away to camp since she was 6 years old. First time we dropped her off at camp, we were there for about 10 minutes trying to make her feel comfortable, and she was like, okay, bye, Mom and Dad, I have to go with my friends.
You were like, later.
So, yeah, she's
Kari
always
was like,
been a
later.
very adventurous, very mature for her age in terms of interacting with other people.
And Kari, I understand that you spent a year in Spain, then you came back, and then you returned to Spain?
I went to France.
You went to France,
in
okay.
11th grade.
In the 11th grade. Now, what an exciting feeling that must have been like. Do you hope to continue your international study abroad programs even in college?
Oh, definitely. I want to continue language possibly, and I want to study abroad in college. Yeah.
Nice. Kari, what has your experience been being an African-American teenager in countries where there aren't so many of us, so many Black people?
Well, when I was in Spain, for example, I went to a Spanish high school, and I might have been like the 1 out of 3 Black kids, like in a preschool to 12th grade type of setting. But I was maybe like, I was a minority at this school, but at the same time, it was a new experience, and I was able to learn from my classmates, and they learned from me, and not necessarily just being Black, but also being American, and yeah.
Kari, did you ever feel like you were missing out on kind of classic American experiences like prom or going to various typical high school events, whether it's high school football or just participating in what some would consider like the typical American experience? Did you miss out on that?
Well, I still go to high school in the States. So even though like when I was in Spain and my friends were starting high school, it was definitely worth it to go abroad. And next year I'll be a senior, and so I guess I'll have senior.
So you'll be able to go to prom
exactly.
then. Yeah, you kind of have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, I want to bring someone else into the conversation. Our next guest is joining us via Skype from Oakland, California. He started diversity abroad after studying in Mexico and Spain. Andrew Gordon speaks to student groups and professionals about international education and careers. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you give me a sense as to what the state of the movement is like when it comes to increasing minorities, particularly African-American children, in international study abroad programs?
Yeah, no, thanks. It's a great movement. There's one in the past talked about diversity of color studying abroad. something that wasn't necessarily really mainstream, but we see much more now at the high school level, as your guest, as well as at the collegiate level, many more students of color studying abroad.
What's at risk if more minority students aren't participating in these international study abroad programs? What are they missing out on, say, for example, when it comes to college applications or jobs?
And I think that's at the heart of it. A lot of times people think about study abroad. They think about, oh, you're gallivanting throughout Europe, and it's just a fun experience. And don't get me wrong, it is a fun experience. But at the end of the day, we live in a very globalized, interconnected world. And students that have international experience, speak different languages, they're that much more prepared to be competitive, both when it comes to admission to top and competitive colleges, but as well at the end of the day when it comes to graduating and getting jobs. If you have two students that have all things being equal academically, but one has international experience and speaks a different language and can articulate how that experience has helped them be in a position to communicate across culture, so on and so forth, they're much more competitive than the student that hasn't had that.
Andrew, we heard David talk about how Kari came to him one day and said, Dad, I want to learn how to speak Spanish. And he said, well, you're not going to learn it here. Go to Spain. That kind of seems like a response that you wouldn't necessarily hear a lot. So I'm curious, who are the type of kids, and furthermore, who are the type of parents that are supporting international study abroad programs?
Well, and that's true. I would say, in some sense, that David may be a little bit of an anomaly in this, in that many parents aren't necessarily as supportive of their students going abroad. And there's a couple of reasons why. But for certain communities, particularly when you look at the African American community and other communities of color, many times the parents themselves haven't had international experiences. So the idea of sending their student overseas to learn a language or to gain a different experience, that's hard to grasp sometimes. Most of the time, the students that we see going overseas are students who come from more privileged backgrounds and come from backgrounds where international travel has been a part of what they do, what their family has done and what their parents have done. And so that's where you see a big gap between, unfortunately, between students of color versus their Caucasian counterparts.
David, I'm curious, what kind of support, what kind of research did you do in finding a host family, someone that you feel comfortable with? Did you find a network there?
Well, what I had to do is I actually had to find the programs. There are a lot of a plethora of programs, and so it can be a little daunting, a little confusing because there are a lot of them out there. Some of them are just piggybacking off other programs. But the programs themselves are the ones who pick the host families. So at least all of the programs that I was familiar with, they pick the host family for you. But most of them, if they use families over and over again, and if there is a problem, because sometimes there's a bad match. We never had that experience. We've always been very fortunate. We had great matches. But if there's a bad match, they'll find another family for you, usually in the same community.
Andrew, I'm curious as to what is the typical barrier. What is it cost? Is it simply lack of awareness about these programs being out there and available to minority families and students?
And that's a great question. Cost is always somewhat of a barrier. And, at the end of the day, if you're coming from a very disadvantaged financial background, you look at the price tag of some programs and it doesn't seem feasible. But where I organization promotes much more the awareness aspect of it is that the more that students and their family are aware of the programs, the benefits, the personal, the academic, the career benefits that students gain from study abroad, the more they'll look at the experience as an investment in the student's future. And so the same way a parent may see the price tag of college, of going to college and say, oh my gosh, this is so expensive, but they look at it and say, hey, my student needs to do this because by doing this, they're going to have a leg up in the future. Study abroad is the same thing, is by parents understanding and families understanding the benefits that students get from the experience. They'll look at it more as an investment and less of it as an expense.
Kari, what's your next country, your next destination?
I'm interested in studying Arabic, so maybe in the Middle East and college.
My goodness, the most that I wanted to do was to go to King's Dominion in Northern Virginia when I was in high school.
For college day.
Yeah, well, I have to say good luck to you, your future endeavors, not only in high school and college, but also Andrew Gordon. Thank you so much for your insight, founder of Diversity Abroad. We certainly hope that we're helping get the word out about these programs and how useful and important they are. Children in general, but also in particular minority children. So thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Kari, and thank you, David. Good luck to you both. And you are watching Our Take.